MLB season's here. We've got the Masters going on right now. We've got NBA season sort of winding down. But I'm pretty excited about XFL DFS. It's getting tough. The pricing's tough. There's not a lot of value out there. The contest sizes are going way down, but I still think there's an edge. But this could be like one of the last weeks where we can really, really take advantage of some of these bigger prize pools. I don't think these contests are going to fill. Let's get into it. What is up, guys? Welcome to the Edge DFS. My name is Tyson Smith, joined by Ellie Hernandez. Ellie, how you doing, man? We've been pretty busy with MLB and NBA. We've been using some new tools to help us. I shipped a MLB contest and an NBA contest yesterday, so I'm feeling pretty decent. They weren't huge, but, you know, hey, profit's profit. How you doing, man? What's going on with you?
Doing pretty good, man. Yeah, enjoying that new tool as well. You know, just playing around with it. It's been helpful. But yeah, nice takedown last night. Showdown win with Danny Green. Dude hasn't played since 1995.
I thought he retired.
Came out with like 28 points, real life points.
He was like 0.47% owned in the showdown slate. Anyways, look, with XFL DFS right now, I'm I feel like the edge is kind of going away. Like there's at least enough data out there and people know a lot of these players. But I think as we start to find, we're gonna have to find like little edges. Like this week, as of right now, Brandon Silvers on the DK app is listed as out. And we've seen that in the past where some of these guys are listed as out and they're not actually out. You could get a little bit of an ownership boost with that. His ownership may be super low. We don't know for sure if he's going to play or not. But my point is we got to find these tiny little pieces of information and try to take advantage of it, because right now the pricing is, all these guys are priced pretty accurately. And I've been trying to build a cash lineup all morning, or like now it's $180 contest, 4 max. Used to be the 333, it went to the 222, now it's the 180, and it's only 5K up top. I've been trying to build a lineup for that, and I'm just having a lot of trouble, just because I think we're waiting. Hopefully some news comes in, and we have some weather to talk about in probably the best game of the weekend. So there's a lot to talk about in this episode. We're recording this on Friday morning around 10. We wanted to wait as late as possible to get as much information as we can. But as of now, let's briefly look back at last week. We're not going to talk a whole lot about it. Hey, D-Day, dude absolutely crushed. 48 fantasy points. This crafty lefty guy, again, he split this time, but he won the big contest again like 2 weeks in a row. Dormandy, quarterback, Devion Smith, Lucky Jackson, Cody Latimer, Abram Smith, Jacquez Patrick, and Roughnecks defense. This is not some sort of crazy lineup. Like, everybody on here is a pretty good player, and everybody on here is relatively owned. If you look at that ownership, now Devion Smith, his ownership was quite a bit lower last week. His yards per carry, he's like 3 yards per carry this year, 3.1. He's just not looking great when it comes to efficiency, but he's on the field a lot and he's getting involved and he's getting a lot of opportunities. Jacquez Patrick last week, I mean, going into that, basically the end of that game, he had like 2 fantasy points, and I had like 80% of him, because on paper, you got a running back going up against Vegas. Vegas's rush defense is the worst in the league, and apparently they turned into the 85 Bears last week somehow. But thankfully, Jacquez Patrick got there in garbage time. Sometimes you hate garbage time, sometimes you love it. In this case, I loved it because it helped me at least break even. But this is an interesting lineup. What jumps out to you here, man? Like, Dormandy had like the best day ever in the XFL, pretty much. I mean, he had 6 total touchdowns, 48 points. I mean, you see on the thumbnail, this dude absolutely crushed. And what are your thoughts about him this week too? Like, are you interested in him this week? And what are your thoughts on this build overall? It's a pretty straightforward build.
Yeah, man. I like Quentin Dormady. We talked about him a couple weeks now. Obviously, nobody was going to project him for 48 fantasy points. Like that's up there with the most we've ever seen from a quarterback ever, just including NFL, right? So that's crazy. But no, man, it was a great play, and I think the key thing that stands out here again, we got 3 running backs yet again. one right wide receiver and one tight end. So it's kind of an interesting build. Again, not that crazy. Earlier in the season, we were looking at potentially playing more running backs and realized that they were kind of shit. But it looks like they've kind of established into their roles, and we may need to be taking stabs at these lineups with a couple more running backs in them.
Yeah, I think the one thing that we're noticing is, yes, the running backs are priced up a bit, but now that we're later into the season, these running backs are actually getting more run. They're being utilized a lot more, and a lineup with only one wide receiver in it. I mean, that's just crazy. If you'd have told me that like week 3 or week 4, I'd have said you're crazy. But we're starting to see things shift a bit. More running backs. Maybe we try to focus on running backs a little bit more this week because you got guys like Dimebag Darrell Darrington. He's in the 5K range, and now he's listed as a starter. It's a tough matchup going up against Arlington, but we might have to take advantage of some of those guys like Rod Smith or Lovett. And I love it. We're gonna have to figure out ways to get different. Let's actually talk. Let's just jump into week 8. Let's look at the bird's eye view here of the slate. If you guys want to copy this, jump into the Discord. That Discord's free. You can scan it right there, or you can just go down to the description and click join. We're gonna have a lot of info, obviously, coming. Tomorrow, Saturday morning. I think the first game's at 1, and then the next game's at 4. So it's a midday situation on Saturday. So look, the first game here is Vipers going into St. Louis. St. Louis is 7-point favorite and 46 total in this game. The one thing we got to worry about here is AJ McCarron is listed as questionable. He fell on his shoulder in that game. He was out for like a play or two maybe. Came back in and finished the game strong. But on paper, this Vegas Vipers defense is terrible. They looked better last week, but hey, you're going up against the Brahmas. It's not really the most powerful offense in the world. But you would think on paper this is a game you absolutely want to target, especially playing in the Dome. St. Louis is at home. But look here, man. Like, this kind of worries me with McCarron being questionable, right?
Yeah, man. So look, with McCarron being questionable, I think it makes for an interesting situation. Let's just be clear. I don't think I'm going to be playing any of his backup if he's out for whatever reason. All that's going to do is just make me like Jalen McClendon stacks a little bit more. And then you run back with maybe Akeem Butler, Darius Shepard, or whatever the fuck his first name is. I think that's a way that you can attack that game. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, we need to be keeping an eye on AJ McCarron. The good news is that injury information is going to come out, because it is the first game of the slate, but It also is going to leave you, little time to kind of adjust what you're doing to make sure that you're capturing. We'll get there, the DC game as well, right? The late Sunday night game. So just build with late swap in mind for this one in particular.
Yeah, you're right. I mean,
Geronimo Alshin, you got his wrong name.
Alcyon. So let's briefly look at injuries. I always forget to bring this up right away, but when you look at Ethan Wolf and Jaquez Ezer, they're questionable. Badet is out. So Badet has been a guy that I've been playing every single week up until last week. I basically faded him completely just because McClendon was a question mark. I didn't really know what to expect, and he's super expensive. He got injured with a thigh injury and left, I think, in the first quarter, or at least the first half. So he's out. You got Geronimo Alcyon, a.k.a. Geronimo Allison. He was a full practice Wednesday and Thursday. Sidney Sweeney was probable, and Rod Smith is probable. Those guys will probably play. Ja'Cour Pearson, with a foot injury, has been limited all week. So this is kind of interesting. We all know that Philip Lindsay got signed by the Sea Dragons, and when you look at their when you look at their depth chart, now we got to take these depth charts with a grain of salt because these are all kind of all over the place sometimes. But when you look at their depth chart, the most recent one that was released, you got Bradwell as the starter, you got Philip Lindsay as the backup, you got T.J. Hammonds, who's typically in that backup role, third down back pass catcher. He's listed as a wide receiver behind Ja'Cour Pearson. So look, we'll get more into this as we talk about this game specifically. But if Ja'Cour Pearson is out, or if we think that he can be limited in certain ways, there could be some opportunity there to find some value. A TJ Hammond's guy at 3,500, if he's really going to be getting a bunch of wide receivers reps and playing that kind of that Jacoby Pearson role, I mean, they kind of have that similar sort of play style. You could see a lot of value open up there. We'll get more into that here in a minute. So Victor Bolden is questionable. And with Luis Perez now potentially starting, most likely starting this week for Arlington, he's at 3K. If he does play, I'm interested in him. Brandon Silvers with that elbow injury. Look, we saw last week, Cole McDonald, he just wasn't ready to be thrown into that spot. He didn't have a firm grasp of the offense. He didn't have a lot of command. So if Brandon Silvers is healthy, he will start because Houston is spiraling down at this point. They really need to pick up a win here. So if Brandon Silvers is even 70% healthy, I think he starts this game. Putman, Sputnik, full practice. Ben Kirk out for the year. So what's his bucket from Orlando? Paxton Lynch was released. With Dormandy absolutely going off, Paxton Lynch was released. They don't need him anymore. Paxton Lynch gets signed by San Antonio. So right now, as of now, Cone is not even on the injury report. It looks like he's going to start. Jawan Pass, to me, is one of these guys that they do not want to play. Guy can barely get the snap off. No offense to him. I wish the best for him, but he does not seem like he's ready to get a start. So if Cone is out, or if there's any question about him, I mean, could we see Paxton Lynch active and could we see him playing? Maybe, but I'm not super interested in him. And then of course you got AJ McCarron here. What really jumps out to you here on this list?
I think the biggest things that we got to keep an eye on is Shakur Pearson and AJ McCarron. Obviously, we talked a little bit about AJ a bit ago, but if Shakur Pearson's out, even if you don't directly go to TJ Hammonds, I do think it opens up a lot. And again, that's not earth-shattering news, but we'll be keeping a close eye on that one. And then, Victor Bolden, this is kind of interesting just because he was added in the last week or two to the Arlington team to kind of shore up that wide receiver depth. If he's out, I am kind of quite, I want to see who's going to be the fourth or fifth wide receiver in that lineup. Maybe you can take stabs at a 3K guy there, but I'd probably talk more about him than we should probably focus on him for the entire season.
Yeah. All right, let's get back into this. So anything else to talk about for this St. Louis game here? Are you interested in McClendon? I mean, who's McClendon going to throw the ball to at this point? Lovett, Allison, Bryant. I mean, are you interested in getting stacks from them? Because look, St. Louis is going to give up some pass yards.
Yeah, I like getting stacks with him. I mean, I think you can do McClendon, Rod Smith, and McClendon Lovett if you're feeling real conservative, and maybe go 2-1 that way. Do that and Hakeem Butler. It's probably not the greatest correlation play, but even then, like especially. Did we say Bidet was out? Yeah, Bidet's out, right?
Yeah, he's out for sure. So,
okay.
It's
so
tough.
You have Martavis Bryant, you got Sidney Sweeney. We saw Matt Sexton get a lot more love last week, right? That was another one of these value guys that we've been trying to play in the first couple of weeks that just wasn't getting run. So 3,800 Matt Sexton after the week that he had last week. I think that he's very much in play. So even if you just look at McClendon, a wide receiver plus one of a run back from the Battlehawks, I think it's just a very low price stack. It'll give you a lot of flexibility.
Yeah, and you also have a guy like Saeed Blacknall, who was signed like 2 weeks ago, I believe, is in play now at 3K. But I think most people are going to be focused on St. Louis here. And if AJ McCarron is active, even if his shoulder is hurt, I think there's a chance AJ McCarron is super high owned because of the matchup and just because of his price and everything that's going on. And maybe that shoulder, that shoulder maybe isn't going to be ideal for him to go out and throw for 250 yards. Something to think about. Last thing on this game, if you're McClendon, you got to be pissed that you had a breakout week the same week that D-Day Dormandy absolutely lit up the world because nobody's really talking about McClendon. He would have been the guy that won somebody a shitload of money because I think he was, 6K? He came out and scored, 20, 25, 24 fantasy points or whatever. Tough break for him, but that could actually be better for us if we're thinking about playing McClendon stacks. He's probably still going to be relatively low owned. All right, so let's move to this next game. Arlington Renegades coming into Orlando. Weather should be fine. Now there is a chance, I'm about an hour away from Orlando. There's a chance there could be some rain. So we got to keep an eye on that. I'm not going to put any, in Florida here, there's a 40% chance of rain basically 24 hours a day. So as of now, it probably looks like there could be a chance of rain, but let's just keep an eye on that as we get closer into, Saturday morning. So thoughts here, man. Dormandy is still priced pretty good. I think his ownership is going to come up quite a bit, as well it should be. But Arlington Renegades, they're good against the pass. They're good against the run. They have a pretty good defense. They did lose last week to Seattle. Gave up 24 points, but Seattle didn't light it up necessarily. So what are we doing with this game? This to me feels like a game that we could take advantage of with Luis Perez most likely starting. Let me play this clip real quick. This is Bob Stoops talking about the quarterback situation for Arlington. They got rid of Plitt. They've signed another guy. It's basically Perez and why am I blanking on his name? Kevin Anderson. Mr. Anderson. Check this out.
What are you looking at in terms of like starting quarterback this weekend with Drew Plitt being?
Yeah, we've been sharing reps with Kevin and Luis both. And just we'll evaluate at the end of the week here after tomorrow's practice who we think overall has, done the best job, gives us the best chance at least to start the game.
So I think he's jerking us around a little bit, in my opinion, but who knows? I mean, am I reading into the fact that he brought up Kevin and Luis? No. I think Luis plays. They have to. They traded for this guy. They just brought him in.
Bro, that was typical grandpa voice. That was like when you hear your grandpa out on the golf course. He's like, "Oh, we're just hanging out with my grandsons here." That's exactly what that was. He's just throwing some shit out there. Fucking Bob Stoops.
Yeah. Look, Perez. If they lose this game, they're done. Like they're most likely not going to be able to make the playoffs. I mean, there's always a chance they could. But I think you got to put Perez in here no matter, last week, or I think it was even 2 weeks ago when he got traded, he was on the sideline telling these other quarterbacks what to do. Like this guy's played for every team in the country, basically, Perez has. He's going to be able to figure out how to come in and adapt to this offense very quickly. And if they don't put him out there, they need to fire this entire coaching staff at the end of the season. There's no reason why Perez should not be playing. Anything else to talk about here? Do you like Canelo a little bit more? I think we just have to wait and see how this offense performs with Perez, right? And what pass catchers actually matter now, right?
Yeah. I mean, look, I still think that the 1, 2, 3 guys are probably going to stay the same. They're going to probably keep the playbook pretty tight. So those guys this initial week will probably be fine plays. Moving forward, we might want to see who he's comfortable with, similar to McClendon or similar to. Who was that other wide receiver that we were just talking
Victor
about?
Bolden
that started getting some love.
Yeah, Anquan Bolden's
exactly.
brother. Yeah. And when it comes to so by the way, I didn't mention the total here. Orlando's actually favored by 1.5 points, and this is only a 42.5 point total. But basically, we got to consider every wide receiver on this Orlando team. The hardest part is getting these guys that besides Latimer and Rambo, it's a new random dude every week that goes off for this team. So hey, take a shot at some of these dudes that you've never heard of in tournaments. Maybe it'd be worth it to get a 3K guy from Orlando that could score a touchdown. You ready to move on to this Sunday first game here?
Good.
So Houston Roughnecks going into San Antonio. The Roughnecks are minus 205 on the money line. They're 5-point favorites, and this is a 40-point total. This is the lowest total on the slate. Silver's most likely coming back. If Silvers doesn't come back, we've got Cole McDonald again. I'm still interested in getting some Cole McDonald if he does start. But as of now, it looks like Brandon Silvers is ready to come back. And you got Jack Cohn on the other side of it. Jack Cohn was one of these guys they were trying to bench, and they were trying to find new guys. Benkert would have been the guy to start the rest of the year, most likely, because he looked pretty good. How confident are we in Jack Cohn that can come out and score 2 touchdowns? I don't think we're confident at all, really. Jaquez Patrick is priced well this week, but I'm not confident in playing him a lot against this Roughnecks defense. Now, the Roughnecks did give up some yards to Brian Hill last week, but I'm still not super. We saw them really, really do well against Abram Smith, and shut him down at the goal line a few times. So what are we doing here with this game, man? You got to be interested in Houston stacks. There's a ton of wide receiver value here. Burnett is obviously, he's relatively expensive, but he's still worth a shot. He's got high upside. And then you got Cedric Burge, you got Justin Smith, you got Travell Harris. You got a lot of these wide receivers in the mid-range that can absolutely get two touchdown games. And with Brandon Silver's back, they're going to go back to throwing the ball more. With Cole McDonald, they had to run the ball more. We know A.J. Smith does not want to run that ball. So what are we doing here with this game?
I like the Houston Roughnecks a little bit here, especially if Brandon Silvers is 100% good to go. I do like Cole McDonald. Obviously, the rushing upside in 8,500 is something that I'll take a couple stabs at. But I like this offense a little bit better passing when Brandon Silvers is healthy and good to go. And this is a matchup that kind of benefits them. The Brahmas aren't necessarily all that great. They started off a little bit stronger. I thought their defense was going to be better, based on what we saw earlier in the weeks, but. This is definitely a matchup I think that the Roughnecks can take advantage of. But with that being said, I think my primary idea here will probably be take pieces off this game, maybe a little bit of Burnett and grab the Lakers, Landon Akers over there. It when it looks with that period there, man, in the yellow, I really got thrown off. Lakers. I thought that said fucking Lakers. But anyways, yeah, I think this is a game where you can take pieces off. The total is not there, so I don't know if you want to go a full game stack like a 2-1 or a 3-1, but this is one where I think you take Burnett, Akers, maybe a Brandon Silver stack occasionally, but that's probably how I'll approach this one.
Yeah, I mean Houston, it was a 22.5 point implied total is the second highest on the slate, so we got to remember that. I know the San Antonio Brahmas defense has usually performed pretty well, but with Silvers coming back, you got to remember he was the lead for the MVP for most of this year. This team was undefeated, and they lost 3 straight games. You got to think they're going to come out. They got to win this damn game. If they end up losing 4 straight games, man, this is not going to be good. And then you got guys on San Antonio side like I don't know how many times I'm going to play TJ Vasher before I end up just saying screw him. He's going to be cheap again. And, he had that big touchdown. That was a 50-plus yard touchdown from Benkirk that was pass interfered on in that first quarter or whatever. You got to think about...
You need to give wide receivers pass interference yards. You got to get points for getting a 70-yard pass interference.
I know.
Man. That's fucking crazy.
Totally. All right, let's move on to the best game on the slate on paper. DC Defenders going into Seattle. Seattle's favored. They're minus 130 on the money line. They're 2-point favorites. It's a 46.5 point total. But something we got to talk about here, man. It is going to rain. The weather is not looking good. We've seen the DC Defenders. We've seen them do well in the rain. It fits their scheme really good. I mean, look, I know we're recording this on Friday, but it seems to me like there's going to be a pretty good chance. We're going to obviously have to check in on Sunday again in the morning and see, but look at that. 90, 80% chance of rain during that time of the game. And 15-mile-per-hour winds. So what does that do? What are we thinking here? Can you go under on this game and get some of the rushing attacks from both of these teams, specifically Abram Smith, and get some of these guys who can catch some short little passes as an extension to the run game, like Ja'Cory Pearson if he plays, or Lucky Jackson, those kind of guys. What are we thinking for this game? You could get some huge leverage because there is a ton. People aren't going to utilize late swap, most likely. They're just probably going to stick with all their exposure to this game. Is there an opportunity to just get one-offs from this game and kind of fade this game and just hopefully try to get all your points beforehand and maybe this game sort of putters out and hits the under? I don't know. What do you think?
It's a great point, right? It's something that we need to be mindful of when we're building strategies for these multiple day slates. You got to keep in mind the first game and the very last game, right? Don't want to overexpose yourself to the first game, and you don't want to completely take yourself out of exposure for the last game. And with the weather situation going here, I think DC is going to be a decent option defensively. I think you can target this game with a handcuff. This might be one where you even run a naked Tamu. You could do Tamu, Abram Smith, and defender's defense.
Yeah.
As long as that weather gets worse and worse, I think it opens up to Seattle for turnovers. Again, I think that just benefits defense, DC's defense, and opens up some opportunities for some of the other offensive players there. But I think DC wins that game. I don't expect them to I expect them to come out with a bit of a chip of their shoulder, right? They just lost to Orlando.
Yeah.
The undefeated team just lost to the
defeated
the team that couldn't win, right? The defeated.
Yeah.
So I expect them to come out with a little bit more of an edge. They'll probably give up some passing yards. We know that they suck at that. But I think that their defense is in play as well as their run game.
If this is a clear day, if God opens the clouds and somehow there's no rain going on, no wind, that benefits Seattle a lot. I think Seattle wins this game if there's no rain. If it's a shit fest like we've seen with a lot of Defenders games where it's windy and rainy, you gotta give the DC Defenders the advantage in this game. And I think this hits the under if it rains a lot. All right, let's get into this breakdown here. We're gonna go position by position, and then we'll get into some stacks, and we'll build a couple lineups together, and then we'll send it out. Here we go. Break it down. All right, so our boy Ben DiNucci, he's 12K, getting more expensive every single week. Adrian McCarron is 11.7, more expensive. Teamu, he was 8,500 last week, now he's 98. D-Day Dormandy, 9,400, and McClendon is up to 9,200. But look, you got Brandon Silvers at 89. So when it comes to these top tier guys, are you classifying? We talked about the Holy Trinity last week of quarterbacks that we're comfortable with, and that all worked out pretty well. They all did really well. Just Quinton Dormandy did a lot better, and he was low owned. So if you didn't have him, you were not going to really do super well. Are you putting Quinton Dormandy into that range now? Is he a top tier guy? Even going up against Arlington defense, who's pretty good.
I don't know if you need to go that far as him being a top tier guy, but he's this middle range, even Tamu. Like, I think Tommy, Dormandy, and McClendon almost takes over the new Holy Trinity just because they're priced so much better. Obviously, I love AJ McCarron and Ben DiNucci, but with the question marks that we have with AJ's shoulder, things like that, I'm just not 100% sure that 11.7 is necessarily where I want to go. And I mean, $2,300 cheaper to play a guy who just had 3 rushing touchdowns and a passing touchdown. Probably could have had a little bit more, right? Like, what did he end up with, Dormandy, on? Like 17 total touchdowns?
6
like,
touchdowns.
That's bullshit, man.
Yeah, 6 total touchdowns.
Yeah, he probably should be closer to 10.5K. So just based on what we saw, I think that he's a fine play at 9,400, and then Jalen McClendon at 9,200. Right, those are going to be probably my top 3 owned quarterbacks, and then I'll get in some AJ McCarron and Ben DiNucci. But here's the thing with McClendon. I do think that he's going to get slapped on a little bit this week. I think there's going to be a lot of chasers on the Dormandy experience, right?
Yeah.
All those touchdowns, people missed out on it. I mean, I still had 25% exposure, but because the lineups weren't perfect, right? Like it didn't necessarily profit as much as I would like to. But I think this is a week you can go back to Jalen McClendon. He could get you another 17 to 22 points, and at 9,200, that's kind of the salary you want your quarterback to be with other studs that we want to get to.
Yeah, and so let's look at Brandon Silvers here. So he's 8,900. If he does play going up against San Antonio, I think it's a good opportunity to get him involved. If you look at this, now this could change. But as of now, this is what's showing up on the Draftkings app. We've seen this before where people are looking through and they're not going to play him if it says out, even though he's in. We've seen this happen where even after lock, the dude's literally playing and it says out next to his name. So that's just something to kind of keep that in mind as you're starting to build on Saturday morning. That could make a difference. Now let's talk about Luis Perez at 8,800. So you got to take a risk at him. Look, what was the rule every single week going into this? What team is Orlando playing? Okay, let's stack the shit out of that team that Orlando's playing. I don't know if people are going to be that excited to do this. Orlando still gave up a shitload of points. Their defense, yeah, they play hard, but they're going to give up points. So I know Arlington has not looked good offensively at all, but Luis Perez, man, we've seen him. It doesn't matter what his situation is. He's going to come out. He's going to sling the ball. He's going to be calm, and he's not going to make a ton of mistakes like these other Arlington quarterbacks have. So at 8,800, man, if he's the guy who gets to start, you gotta get some exposure to him in tournaments, right?
Yeah, man, I don't mind getting a little bit of exposure to Luis Perez at 8,800. They brought him in to make this offense work, right? Like, so the idea is that he's going to go out there and have an opportunity to get it going. So look, I think he's fine. I think I may prefer getting up to Brandon Silvers, and then if Silvers is out, paying down $400 or $300 and getting a little bit of Cole McDonald, I think I'd probably split my exposures there. But yeah, I think that this is all a viable pool, especially with so many question marks. I just think that ownership's going to get pushed to Ben DiNucci, AJ McCarron, and now Quentin Normandy, just because of what we saw last week. So again, you don't even need to get crazy playing Luis Perez. You may only need 2 or 3 lineups out of a 20 max, and you might be 3 times the field. Yeah,
exactly. So Jack Cohn 7,100. I'm interested in getting some stacks with him. I really am. At 7,100, we need that quarterback value this week. That's kind of what's killing us, because there's not a ton of quarterbacks that, the last few weeks we've had these 6K quarterbacks, these 7K quarterbacks, and it's really allowed us to build high ceiling lineups as long as these guys go off. I'm interested in a little bit in Jack Cohn. Obviously, we need to make sure that he's actually playing. But another guy I want to talk about here briefly, if this game in Seattle is a shit fest with rain and wind, D'Eriq King, his projection, in my opinion, goes way up. They're going to get him involved a little bit more. We even saw him get involved at running back a little bit a few weeks ago. Like, they were using him as a decoy, but instead of playing Armstead and Smith back there in the shotgun with Te'amu, they put in D'Eriq King on the right side of Te'amu. So at 7,300, I'm interested in getting a couple stacks with him, stack him with Abram Smith, stack him with the defense, whatever you want to do. I think there's some leverage to be had there, because last week he didn't do anything. I mean, he got a concussion, I believe, right? Or he got knocked out of that game. So he's going to be 2% owned or something. Nobody's going to play him. And if he gets you 2 rushing touchdowns and maybe 50 yards on the ground at 7,300 and allows you to build that high upside in the rest of your lineup, that could be worth a couple of stabs on him. All right, let's move on to running back here. All right, so Abram Smith is 10.3, Brian Hill 9,700, Max Borghi 9,100, Devion Smith 8K. So this top tier of running backs here, I think you got to go Abram Smith, you got to go Brian Hill, you got to get plenty of exposure, especially if that game is rainy in Seattle. Brian Hill going up against Vegas, like I said before, I targeted Jacquez Patrick last week like crazy. He got shut down by the 85 Bears Vegas defense out of nowhere. I don't see that's sticking up again this week, but look, it all depends. Brian Hill, if AJ McCarron is out, you got to think he gets a boost. They're gonna rely on him a lot more. They're gonna dump it off to him more. He's gonna get PPR points. So what do we do with these top 2 dudes? You know that these guys are gonna be high owned again. They've been high owned every week, pretty much ever since Abram Smith went off. What do we do with these 2 dudes?
Yeah, I don't know that we're going to have a salary to pay for both of them. I think you kind of just make one of them a main staple of your lineups. I think you kind of just lean a little bit more towards Ryan Hill just because he's $600 cheaper. But I think both guys are in play, right? Abram Smith, I mean, if you put Abram Smith in your flex, then you have 10.3 to late swap literally whenever you want throughout the entire slate, right?
Great point.
Because he's the last game on Sunday night. So, I like Abram Smith for that. Brian Hill, obviously, if you play him, make sure you're starting him at your actual RB spot, because that's the first game. You want the flexibility again to move. Yeah. But look, I think both those guys are great plays. I think this is a slate though where we might need to find some more mid-tier options, right? You're not going to be able to play both Smith and Hill and still be able to get stud wide receivers. But so if you want to go Smith Hill and then get a bunch of 3K wide receivers, that's fine. But I think you need to go like Smith, maybe get a little bit of Jacquez Patrick, and then even go down to a guy like see if you can build with Darius Bradwell or who our guy John Lovett. See, some of these guys we're gonna have to find running backs in that 45 to 5,500 range that we're comfortable playing. I think.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think this is the key. If you find that one dude if Bryson Aline gets 2 touchdowns at 4,900, that guy's probably going to be in the optimal because it really allows you to pay up and get Abram Smith or Brian Hill in a flex spot, and get some of these high dollar wide receivers. A guy I kind of like this week, actually. Well, okay, Devion Smith, he's 8K. That little interview that we heard from Stoops, he went out of his way to say he absolutely loves Devion Smith, that he's like the best, that he's their best player on their team. He's a hard runner. He's averaging 3.1 yards per carry this year. He's getting involved a little bit in the pass game, but at 8K, last week he did well, so his ownership's going to be up. But I kind of it's Orlando. We have to remember this is still Orlando. I don't care that they beat DC last week. You're going to want to target players and one-offs against Orlando and stacks. So Devion Smith, I really like him. What do we do with Philip Lindsay? So in the beginning of the show, we showed that depth chart. I don't think Philip Lindsay is a direct replacement for the TJ Hammond snaps, which it's probably like an 80-20 or 70-30 in the past when it comes to Bradwell and TJ Hammonds. I think Philip Lindsay is going to be a little bit more involved. He just was signed this week, but look, he's a running back. He's played in many different systems. There's not a whole lot for him to learn. Let's just be honest. I couldn't go in and learn it, but he's a professional. He's a Pro Bowl running back, and he provides a lot of upside at 7,800. I don't know if his ownership is going to be boosted quite a bit for no reason, just because he's a name and because he was in the news. I don't quite know. I tend to think that it would be. But at 7,800, if he's actually getting like a true 50-50 with Bradwell, you got to think about playing him, especially in the rain, in my opinion. Because if he's in the rain, he's going to get dump offs quite a bit. He's going to get 4 or 5 receptions, and if he gets a touchdown at 7,800, you're going to need him. So what are your thoughts on Philip Lindsay and Bradwell and TJ Hammonds at 3,500? What are we doing with those guys?
I'm going to keep it pretty simple. I don't even think Philip Lindsay is going to land in my player pool this week. I want to see what happens and how they use this offense, or use him in the offense. Bradwell will, and then TJ Hammonds, he's just kind of an interesting play to me in general. If he ends up playing some wide receiver at 3,500, he just, he's kind of a pretty solid value play. So I am interested in him. I don't know if this is necessarily the week to risk it with Philip Lindsay, man. DC run defense. If you're going to attack DC, especially with Seattle, I just grab Ben DiNucci and a wide receiver, in my opinion, and go that route. DC's run defense is pretty good, so I'd rather just stack up their pass game.
Like I mentioned before, Devin Darrington, Dimebag Darrell, he is listed as a starter now on the depth chart. I don't know how much we can read into that. To me, I'm reading into it a little bit. Somebody actually put on a document that he's number 1. I don't know what that means for snap wise, but he gives them a big boost. The small amount of opportunities that he's gotten in the past with Jermaine Martin as the guy, he's taken advantage of. Devin Darrington has. So I really think at 5,100, it's a tough matchup. Like I said, against Arlington. But these are XFL teams. They're not going to be super consistent. Can Devin Darrington get 2 touchdowns and they still don't put up a ton of points and they don't put up a ton of yards? Yeah. So at 5,100, he's worth a shot. Anybody else to talk about here?
Yeah, just real quick. Don't forget about Letty Brown. We saw him get a little bit more run last week. He's been getting a little bit more love in the Arlington side. So Again, 3,700. He's a guy that I'm not going to be afraid to play. You don't need 20%, but just one of those guys you want to rotate into a few of your lineups. Have him in your player pool.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, wide receivers. So Ja'Cory Pearson is 11.4K. He's listed on the injury report. We don't know what to expect from him. He's 11.4K. I like what you said earlier. We've been doing a lot of MLB and NBA the last week straight. So our minds are thinking a little bit differently, and we got to utilize late swap. Lock one of these dudes from this game in, as a one-off. One of these high dollar guys in the flex, and then you could late swap later depending on the news. If Ja'Cory Pearson's out, then you can get some more Abram Smith or vice versa or whatever. But by playing Ja'Cory Pearson in the flex, first of all, nobody's going to play him because he hasn't been doing well lately. I think his ownership's going to collapse. In the big tournament, I don't expect to see him over 20%. Do you?
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, so you could pay up to be different because he's still one of the top wide receivers in the league, and in a game that can be rainy, a guy like Ja'Cory Pearson is going to be the one who benefits the most from that. He's going to get screen passes, going to be little slant passes. They're going to end arounds, whatever they do to utilize him. If he plays, he's obviously a good option, and he's going to be lower owned, and he could come out and have a 30-point game in this game. It could happen against the DC defense, who does not do well against the pass. So locking in one of these like high price dudes for this game in the flex, and then late swapping out of them depending on the news that we hear, that is a pretty solid strategy in my opinion, because nobody is going to react to the news. Even in NBA, people don't react to news like they should, and especially with the XFL, nobody's going to be late swapping. So take advantage of that if you can. Hakeem Butler, 10.8K. This dude is the number one pass catcher in the league now. Every week he's going to come out, and you can expect probably a touchdown from him, or at least 75 yards receiving. Shepard to me at 8,800 is like once again a very, very solid play. But it all depends on AJ McCarron. I think these guys kind of get a little bit of a decrease, even going against the Vegas defense, just because of that shoulder for McCarron, especially a guy like Darius Shepard, who is usually the recipient of a lot of these long balls. If AJ McCarron can't throw the ball deep like he normally could, you might see a little bit less from Shepard here. You got Josh Gordon at 9,800. I'm not interested in him again. Blake Jackson at 8,900. Definitely interested in him. What do we do here, man? There's a lot of dudes to talk about here at the top. I didn't even mention Deontay Burnett, but at 9,900, his ownership probably won't be super high. So what do we do here, man? Where are you leaning with these top end guys?
I think it's similar to the quarterback situation, right? We have the two guys that you can pay up for, and do that when you can and where you can. But I still think that this mid tier is just still not quite priced correctly. Darius Shepard, 8,800. That's a mispricing, assuming that AJ McCarron's healthy. He should probably be closer to 9,900 or something along those lines. Again, the dude just continues to get work. Same with Blake Jackson. Right? I don't play Josh Gordon, just play Blake Jackson. He's cheaper and he's going to get more volume. And I almost prefer Blake Jackson over Ja'Cory Pearson as well, just because he's 2K cheaper and he's still going to get similar output.
Yeah.
But Pearson, I think, is a great GPP play. To your point, I think a lot of people are going to flock more just price-wise directly over to Abram Smith or even Brian Hill. So Pearson's ownership is probably going to be sub 15%. All right. So I think you can use him as one-offs. And again, at 11.4K, if you have him as a one-off in your flex, you have enough money to switch to Abram Smith.
Yeah.
You have enough money to literally do anything you want. Just make sure you have a nice 2v2 built in there.
Yeah.
But look, man, I still think you can take stabs on some other guys here, right? Like Deontay Burnett is really interesting to me. I think people are just going to forget about him because of what we've been seeing from the Houston Roughnecks team. But if Brandon Silvers comes back, like this is kind of a great opportunity for them to get right? Grab Silvers, Deontay Burnett, run it back with someone from San Antonio. It doesn't matter. And then I think you're good. I don't know if I want too many other people from Houston, but I think I'll get some Burnett.
That Kirkland injury, man, it's huge. I mean, they've lost 3 straight games without him. They just haven't been able to figure it out. There's been some injuries, obviously, with the quarterback, but if Silvers is back, Deontay Burnett is a damn good option because he's going to be targeting him quite a bit. Looking in this mid-range here, like if I'm building for this $180 4 max with 5K up top, I'm trying to find good value. And I'm trying to find good value with high floors. I don't need to build some crazy GPP lineup with Geronimo Allison. I just need to find pretty good value that I can, because I've cashed every single week I've played that. That same contest has either allowed me to break even with bad tournament lineups, or profit quite a bit in that contest. And I've just been finding, I've been using guys like Lucky Jackson at 7,500, Travell Harris at 7K. I don't know if necessarily that's the route I'm going to go, but Cedric Byrd again at 5,800. I keep talking about Cedric Byrd. I know with Cole McDonald he saw a little bit more run, but you're still talking about a guy who leads the team. At least last I checked, he still leads the team in receptions and targets. I could be wrong about that. I didn't check. Ellie, would you check that on the stats? Because I'm pretty sure that's where we're going. But this mid tier here, Geronimo Allison, if he's healthy, and Martavis Bryant, I'm willing to take a couple more stabs on Geronimo Allison this week because there's no Jeff Badette. And obviously, Sydney Sweeney at 5,300 is a good option because he could be the number one dude. So in this mid range here, I don't know why Jalen Tolliver is even here. Screw that guy. In this mid range here, what are you thinking, man? Like there's just like the running backs. I feel like this is where you can really find a ton of value, and you get a dude who scores 2 touchdowns. That's what you're going to need this week.
Yeah, man. I mean, look, so I may have misspoken a little bit earlier. I said that I was interested more in Burnett, not necessarily all the other Houston receivers. I take that back. That is wrong. We all know better. I'm going to play Cedric Byrd. I'm going to play Travell Harris. I think that's still kind of just where I'm going to be staying. I still like our Sydney Sweeney, Josh Hammond. These are guys that I'm comfortable getting a little bit of a rotation in. But there's another guy like Eli Rogers at 4K. Like he's still a guy that I'm going to get exposure to, right? Marcel Aitman right there at 4,100. Right? These are guys like I know you wanted to talk mid tier, but it's just. These guys are getting the same amount of targets as guys priced in it's 6,800, 7K, right? So Austin Prohl has 21 receptions on the year. Eli Rogers has 18. Austin Prohl is 6,900 and Eli Rogers is 4K. So there's not that much difference in what we're getting. It's just Austin Prohl has a couple touchdowns. Eli Rogers gets involved in this offense one game, and all of a sudden he's 3% owned and you've got 20 fantasy points from him. Totally. So we keep saying it every week, and I know I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent here, guys, so sorry, but we keep saying it every week, but don't get locked in on any one player. Like have exposures and depth in rotations to your stacks. That makes sense. Don't randomly throw guys in there, but get exposure to some of these other guys. Eli Rogers can be 4% owned and he could have his game.
Yeah, I mean, I don't care if Abram Smith is $2,500. Like, you just can't lock any of these dudes in. Abram Smith could come out and twist his ankle in the pregame. Like, there's a couple guys that you could be. Abram Smith is probably a bad example, but my point here is, I'm just not comfortable. Like last week, I went crazy with Jacquez Patrick because on paper it's a fucking smash spot, and he sucked ass. I mean, thankfully he got some garbage time stuff, but you just cannot go too crazy over the field confident on anybody really in the XFL at all. Juwan Green and Jordan Vesey are projecting well. As they should be. They're going against DC, but if it's a rain game, I don't know how much volume is gonna be out there. Juwan Green at 4,500 is showing up in a lot of my crunches because he's projected well. I think that's just the Vegas totals that are allowing that to happen. But you should be able to mix these dudes in. VC as well. I like what you're saying about like Eli Rogers stuff, but look, we got to talk about Marcel Aitman. This guy was supposed to be the number one dude coming into this. He was clearly the guy. He was injured a lot. I lost a decent amount of money playing him the first few weeks, but he's 4,100 now. The reason why I hated him is because he was always like 8K or 9K for no reason at all. He's $4,100. He had 3 straight end zone targets in that game last week. He's getting involved. They want to get him involved because he's the number one dude. And look, if you have Aitman, who is absolutely tearing it up, and you got to worry about Butler and Shepard and Hill, if Aitman, they can't stop all these guys. So I think Aitman is the guy that kind of can be forgotten about. At 4,100, that is the type of value you need because you're talking about a number one wide receiver who's been down this year and injured. Looks like he's healthy. He's not showing up on the injury reports. He's $4,100. He could score 2 touchdowns in this game, no freaking problem. At $4,100, you're going to need him. When it comes to these Orlando dudes like Dan Williams, we saw him do okay, a few weeks ago, and then he got nothing. And then, you got Jamel, who is, I think, still out. I'll have to confirm that. I'm not going to lose money on him again. Dedrick Thomas. You got a ton of these Orlando dudes that you can look at least. Any thoughts on Sputnik at 3K? Why not? He's Houston. They're going to throw the ball. He almost had a touchdown a few weeks ago. You got to think about Sputnik.
Yeah, I think he's fine. I don't know if I'll be getting a lot to him. I think he's probably a better play for Showdown. But I mean, you got guys like even Mateo Duran, 3,600. there's enough guys that are cheap enough. Dedrick Thomas at 3,100. I think I'd rather kind of play those over Ben Putnam. And then just to kind of echo your piece about Seattle, who we got at 3,600 from Seattle. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. Go up a little bit. Oh, there he is.
Damian Willis.
Damian Willis, right? Like nothing crazy, but 3,600 again isn't. It's still a little bit cheaper as a pivot. Matthew Sexton at 3,800. Again, there's still guys that are just not priced correctly for what we're seeing in the offense. We saw Sexton get decent. We talked about it earlier with him and McClendon or whatever. They were getting a little bit more consistent. So these are just guys that I think you can rotate in. I don't know if I'm going to go much outside that. Like these Vernell Halls, Javonte Payton, Jakari Roberson. Roberson's not in the league right now, I don't think. So some of these guys you just cross out of your player pool, but
yeah. So look,
the others I think are fun.
KD Cannon is a guy I want to talk about. He's 3K on the DK app. He's listed as out. I don't see him on the injury report. That could be a mistake. So keep an eye on that. He's going to be 0% owned, but he had a touchdown last week. Like I keep saying with these Orlando like third, fourth string wide receivers, it seems like a new guy every single week steps up. What was it? Jordan Thomas last week had an incredible catch. I'm 99% sure that's the Jordan Thomas from the tight end from the Panthers and a couple of other teams. KD Cannon at 3K. It was sprinkle him in a little bit. All right, let's move on. Tight ends. Look, Cody Latimer. He's only 8,400 this week. He was 7K. He's always been cheap. He's been 6K. Then he's 7K. Then he's an 8K. Instead of making that huge jump, he had one of his biggest weeks last week, and they only increased his price by $400. So with D-Day Dormandy still with a lot of confidence, and this Orlando team with a lot of confidence, I still think Cody Latimer is one of your strongest plays on the entire slate. It does come with some risks, just seeing that the Arlington defense is pretty good against the pass. But at 8,400, I think he's going to be lower owned than he should be because his price is going to be higher, and there's other guys like Blake Jackson and Shepard in that same area that might steal some of that ownership from him. Sal Cannella at 7K with Luis Perez coming in. You got to give him a huge boost with Luis Perez coming in. They're going to throw the ball more. There's going to be more opportunity for receptions. And at 7K, Sal Cannella is kind of the guy. Sean Price at 3,100. I think he did pretty good last week with McClendon. But Riley Moore and Ethan Wolf, those guys are always risks to score touchdowns in the red zone. Especially, I keep saying it, if you're looking for just a small little one-off stack with King or Te'amu, one of these tight ends could get you a touchdown or two potentially. You're talking deep GPP. You're talking the big contest. You probably would want to do that. Elise Mack at 2,500. He was always a kind of a guy that throughout the beginning of the year we loved him because we didn't love him, but his price at 2,500 always made me play him 5 to 10% every week. I don't know how much I'm getting to him now with Cone was the guy who connected with him earlier in the year, so maybe he gets a little bit of a boost. What do we do with these tight ends here?
Yeah, man, I think you pretty much limit it to Cody and Sal. And then if you land on a little bit of Mac or Carter, Ethan Wolf, I guess I wouldn't be too upset. Riley, Moore, McKinney, that's fine. But again, we just haven't seen tight ends. The punt tight ends make it into the optimal very often. I think you stick with Cody Latimer, Sal Cannella, who are essentially wide receiver twos for their team as opposed to tight end ones.
Yeah, exactly. Let's go to defense. All right, so excuse me. So defenders defense 4,900, Battlehawks 48, Renegades 47. I think this is the 1 week where, in my opinion, there's not that clear holy shit, this is a great matchup. Pay for them. Maybe you could say $4,700 Renegades, but Orlando's offense has looked a lot better. They're going to pass the ball. Probably the team I'm most comfortable with if I'm playing cash or that $180 single entry or whatever, or the 4max, is Houston's defense at 4,400 going up against San Antonio. What do you think? I mean, Sea Dragons could be interesting if it's raining. DC could be interesting as well because of the rain and because of Ben DiNucci. DC is one of these teams that usually will have a good opportunity to score a touchdown on defense. And look, San Antonio, we saw them score a special teams touchdown last week, and then the week before they had a defensive touchdown. Going up against Houston is kind of worrisome to me a little bit, but if Brandon Silvers is injured, look, if Cole McDonald starts, I probably will play a little bit more Brahma's defense. But what do we do here, man? Even Orlando's defense at 3,600 going up against Arlington, hey, it could be worth a shot. I don't think any defense is out of it this week.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think any defense is out of it, but the range of like projections or where I'd like to see some of these defenses come in don't really match their salary, right? So I've been talking about it. I'm willing to have DC defenders exposure. I'm not going to have all that much because I don't want to pay 4,900. But like I said, I'm still going to reserve 15 to 20% of my lineups to have exposure to that game overall. So I'll have a little bit of defenders. I like the Battlehawks. I think Houston is probably, you know, was this Houston the rough? So they're probably going to be the most reliable at 4,400, kind of middling projection. They're actually the highest projected on the site that I'm looking at too.
Yeah, me too.
Not that that matters. Projections are a little bit off, given everything that's going on. But yeah, their matchup against San Antonio, we could see San Antonio suck. Jack Cohn's not necessarily anything.
Yeah.
As of late, but another team that I am interested in is the Guardians. Man, 3,600. A touchdown, man, like a touchdown at 3,600 is enough to be an optimal at special teams and defense. And again, Arlington is another team with a lot of question marks. We don't know how good that they are or how bad that they truly are.
Yeah, if Bob Stoops is stupid enough to not play Luis Perez that entire game and to get Kevin Anderson in there, he had opportunity to play Kevin Anderson and he didn't take it. So why are you choosing to do it now? Like, it makes no sense to me. I think he said that simply to just throw, Orlando off. Perez plays this whole game, but doesn't mean he's going to have an incredible game. So and look, Orlando could give up 20 fantasy or 20 real life points. And if they get a couple sacks, if they get a scoop and score touchdown, they still pay off that salary at 3,600. They probably still end up with 11 fantasy points or something like that. All right, so let's get into sort of our favorite stacks and our favorite value. So for tournaments, what are you thinking stack wise? Like, who's going to be your highest owned stack this weekend? You thinking?
It's probably going to be Jalen McClendon and the Vegas Vipers. And I'll do a game stack here. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to go 3-1, but I'm probably going to be 2-1, even potentially 2-2, right? Maybe McClendon plus wide receiver from the Vipers with Keem Butler and Darius Shepard or Brian Hill and Shepard. So that's probably my favorite stack. And I just think it's a good way to get a little bit of pivot off of what AJ should be chalk and kind of cash build, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, if McCarron, if it comes out, if we get news since it's the first game that he looks good and maybe there's somebody, I mean, there's going to be 35,000+ people in that stadium. Can somebody just tweet out that he's warming up and he looks good? Just anybody help us out here, please. If it comes out that he's looking pretty good and there's not a lot of issues with that shoulder, he'll probably be my highest owned stack because there's a lot of flexibility. Like him, even him and Brian Hill, him and Shepard, and Mitchell. Like there's a lot of different combinations that you can get, even though he's gonna be pretty high owned. That could still ship you a big contest because of that roster construction that you would be using. I think Te'amu at 9,800, if this is a super rain game, Te'amu, Abram Smith, and maybe just those guys together as like a weird little mini stack and then run it back with one dude from Seattle. I think that's like a lot of people are going to go that route where they game stack the shit out of this game. And I think there's a chance that if you faded this game and you stacked up a lot of the other games and you just went with one-offs and you locked in like Ja'Cory Pearson, you made sure that you got him in most of your lineups, or Abram Smith, and then you adjusted to news late, I think that's probably the way I'm going to go, and maybe stay away from a lot of stacks. I'll still have a decent amount, but I'll maybe be under the field when it comes to that. Who's your favorite value play, you think?
I don't know off the top of my head. Let me pull up my wide receivers. I do like 3,600 dude from Seattle. What was his name? Willis. What you talk about, Willis?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, for me, it's tough because there's just not a lot. I think the safest value would be like a guy like Devin Darrington. Or again, I don't know if you consider 5,800 value, but Cedric Byrd again. Like, I think the value mainly comes in the mid-range this week, and you get like two dudes from the mid-range. you know?
And real quick, Marcel Aitman. I don't want to get too crazy about him just because he's mispriced at 4,100, but I mean, he has 18 targets on the year still, or 18 receptions on a bunch of targets, and he hasn't played. So
no, totally. I have 4,100, man. I totally agree with that. I'm gonna have way too much, and I'm gonna lose all my money again because of him. That's because how can I not? All right, let's go to our lineups here. So if you guys are interested in joining that Discord, please go ahead and click down below in the description or scan this if you're watching on your TV or your computer. As we get closer to lock and Saturday mornings, tonight, Friday night, and Saturday morning, we're going to be super busy in there figuring things out. Obviously, an hour before lock tomorrow, we're going to get some sort of news to talk about, most likely, and we're going to have to adapt, and we're going to have to figure out if AJ McCarron's out, what do we do, things like that. Just join that Discord. It's free. There's a lot of really smart dudes, a lot of dudes who've won a decent amount of money in there playing XFL. So join that, and you'll have a bunch of other resources as far as Ellie does a whole Excel spreadsheet with all the stats from, pass catchers and running backs and quarterbacks that you can grab. That's all free stuff. So just help us out and join that. When it comes to building lineups, I think this is kind of where I was starting. I think I've changed my mind a little bit as we've done this show. But as a single entry or that $180 contest, this is kind of where I'm starting to build, but it's tough because I just don't quite know yet. I think I'm going to have to wait a little bit longer to see if any news comes out about, any of these players that could be potentially questionable. I got McCarron at quarterback. Smith, to me, Devion Smith, to me, feels like a good option. He's going to be higher owned, and he's going up against Orlando, so I kind of like him. Shepard, to me, I like him a lot. Blake Jackson, I like Shepard more than Blake Jackson, but I don't know, man. What are your thoughts on, do you want to build a lineup together, considering AJ McCarron let's just pretend AJ McCarron's fully healthy and he's going to play. Do you want to just start from scratch with the McCarron build here?
Sure.
All right. So I need your help in this situation. What do you think we should go? Should we put in Butler? Should we go McCarron and Aitman? I know that sounds crazy, but we got to find some 4K value. We have to find something, or we're just going to end up with a bunch of middle of the road dudes. I think it's a stars and scrubs sort of build if we're doing single entry, and you just take the 5 points from some random dude that may not get you there, but it still allows you to build these high upside lineups. Where do you think we go here?
I think Aitman, and honestly, I'd still probably go Shepard, or Aitman and Butler, but probably Aitman and Shepard.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, they're going up against Vegas, man. There's going to be a lot of passing yards, and hopefully McCarron's healthy. We just don't know right now, but let's pretend he is. Where are we going running back wise? What we talked about here, we gotta, if we're doing that last game, if we're playing Abram Smith, we want to play him in the flex. We're going to need another running back. I don't mind playing a guy like Devin Darrington this week at 5,100. We're looking for high point per dollar type guys, with reasonable ownership. I was thinking Darrington.
Yeah, that was going to be my suggestion, actually.
All right, let's go Devin Darrington at 5,100. That allows us to do a lot here. So with Darrington at Aitman and Shepard, that offsets a little bit of that crazy ownership that we're going to, or the crazy price tag that we have to pay for McCarron. So now let's grab some studs. So I think we absolutely have to go with either Pearson or Abram Smith here. We can't do both, but we should do one. I think if you're leaning towards it, just go Pearson, because you can late swap into Abram Smith because Pearson is more money. Pearson's the highest priced player in the slate. If you put him in the flex, you can find value later after the slate locks and swap into something better. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so let's get our defense here. I think in this case, I think we should probably go Roughnecks just to be safe. I think it's a pretty solid build. But look, once again, now we got to find another $4,500 dude. Now, I get that Pearson is in here, so we can always go down to Smith and then pay up a little bit more, probably get into that more of the 5K range or low 6Ks. But What do you think?
Let's talk about this real quick, because this is exactly what we're talking about when we need the 2v2. So right, pull out Roughnecks. Do we have a 4100 defense that you're comfortable playing?
Sea Dragons, kind of.
Yeah, just I mean, yeah, just throw them. That's not going to work. Never mind.
I mean,
so
Brahmas.
If you have Justin Pierce, Brahmas.
I mean, it's probably stupid,
that's fine.
but
Go ahead and
Houston.
throw in the Brahmas.
Okay. 5K.
And that gives us what, 5K?
Yeah.
So throw in Jordan BC now.
Boy, this is looking like a tournament lineup to me. But we're protecting
for
late swap.
I'm just trying to demonstrate the two, or the swap here, so that we can make the adjustment when we need to, right? So this is how you would do it, and then if you want, right, you could come off of Pearson, go directly to Smith, and then off of VC you can come up and get to another wide receiver in that probably, what is that, $6,100 range.
That's Bird. That's
right, and then
Bird.
that should give you enough to come up off of Brahmas and go to your Houston.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a great late swap, but it's the way you need to be keeping those positions in mind when you're going through to reserve those specific spots.
You can't quite get to Roughnecks, but you can go down from Bird if you wanted to. But
sorry, I didn't mean to hijack the lineup there.
No. This is perfect. This is great. I love this because we got to think we're losing our edge. Like, everybody kind of has the same information right now. The projections are so high, or the prices are so high. Late swap, I think, is how we get it. And I think by setting yourself up and planning ahead to do that in that last game, that's sort of your best option. All right, let's build some tournament lineups here. So you want to go D-Day? Do you want to go McClendon?
Let's go
Perez?
McClendon. Everyone's going to be building their own lineups with D-Day anyway.
All right, so McClendon. Who do we want to get? I mean, look, this is St. Louis, so we're going to want to do a game stack here. Bad defense from Vegas, and not so great defense from St. Louis as far as, pass defense. So what do you want to do? Do you want to do like a Vegas 2 stack and then run it back with a guy, or maybe even 2 guys for a tournament?
So yeah, I want to run it back with 2 guys. I actually want to go Brian Hill and Darius Shepard. Just right out the gate.
Yep, love it. And
then, do we like anybody for value on the Vegas side specifically? Let's see.
I think there's plenty of options. Like Sidney Sweeney is probably the guy that I would lean towards. Geronimo Allison is going to be like the number 1 option, but I mean, how number 1? I mean, he's getting like 4 or 5 targets a game at most, probably. But look,
go
ahead. Let's
throw in Sidney Sweeney and see where we're at.
All right, so we're in a good spot here. We're at 17K. We got 5,600 a pop. If we, what do you want to do with defense? Do you want to go you want to just go something crazy and go Orlando and see what that gets us, if it's even worth it?
Yeah.
All right,
I like that.
So we could pay up. We could try to get exposure to that last game with Abram Smith or Pearson or Blake Jackson or one of those guys, and then punt. That's probably what we should do here, right?
Yeah, let's see if we can get to Abram Smith. I don't know if we're gonna have quite enough left over. 3,100. Yeah, that's fine.
I mean, dude, there's guys at around that 3K range that I don't love, but Putman, obviously you're running one player against your defense, but that doesn't matter at all. Katie Cannon, I mean, you just gotta get creative here. I'll leave this last spot up to you, but
just one, do this for me. Pull Sidney Sweeney out and put in Matt Sexton.
Okay. What's Sexton's price?
3,800.
Yep. All right. 4,600 for this last spot.
Jawan Green, Tyler Vaughn, Steven Mitchell gives you a little bit more flexibility. Probably Jawan Green.
Yep. So what you could do here too. So if you wanted to get real crazy, I don't think here. Let me actually lock in Green and hit save. So now we got a little mini stack here. You could late swap out. You could go up to Pearson and go down from Green later on. Yeah. Let's try this. Instead of Shepard, let's go Steven Mitchell. We're talking tournaments here, remember, guys. And that leaves us 9,100 in that spot. Does that get us anything? Is it even worth it?
How about this? Instead of Steven Mitchell, just fucking put in Aitman, man.
I love it, dude. I love it. I'm gonna lose so much money this week with him. It's gonna happen. But he's a good play. He is. I hate to say it. Oh, I put in Bandy.
9,200.
I put in Bandy. Well, you could play Bandy too, but 4,100. Marcel Aitman, there he is. 93. What does that do?
Blake Jackson.
Blake Jackson.
I mean,
Borgie.
Yeah.
Jackson. See, this is an interesting and shit. If you wanted to get super cray, just put in Shepard too. Screw it.
And fix your defense. If you don't like the Guardians, right, you have flexibility now to come up. You can still play 90 Max Borgie and still have another 100 to fix your defense. So
you can go.
I like it.
Yep, you can go Brahmas. You can go Sea Dragons. You can do a lot of different stuff. So I would consider what we're doing here is best served as thinking outside the box and roster construction and setting yourself up for late swap, things like that. I wouldn't copy any of those lineups directly, especially at this point, because with news, I mean, who knows? I mean, maybe one of those lineups will end up being the optimal lineup. Who knows? I hope. But as of now, I think we gotta focus on late swap because that last game is gonna be the highest owned. Save a little bit of exposure for that. Lock in one of those dudes like Ja'Cour Pearson or Abram Smith. If Ja'Cour Pearson is out, you can go down to Abram Smith and then maybe find another spot in your lineup to pay up a little bit. For one of these mid-range wide receivers. So what'd you learn, man? Like, this is very straightforward. Like, we know who's good, we know who's bad. I'm probably
gonna lose all my money because of Marcel Aitman.
I know. Just as we say, don't put too much into one player. Shit. It's probably gonna happen. But look, this all rests on A.J. McCarron. If A.J. McCarron is out for this game, I don't see it happening. Like, me personally, I mean, he came back into the game still. I mean, look, Ben Kirk came back in the game with broken ribs and finished the game. Doesn't really necessarily mean anything. But this is very important for St. Louis to win this game. Because we were talking about it before the show. There could be like a three-way tie, at the top there in that division. So I think they're gonna start McCarron, which actually kind of sucks because he could be really hurt and they're still gonna play him, and maybe he just doesn't put up a huge fantasy day. So we got to think about that a little bit. What'd you learn, man? What else did you learn?
Look, man, I think this 9,000 tier is probably the best for quarterback. Again, I'm not sure that this is one that we necessarily need to pay up on, but I'll still have a little bit of exposure to A.J. McCarron in St. Louis if he's active. But man, I learned that I like Jalen McClendon and Storm and Dormady.
So Ellie and I have been messing around with Saber Sims. It's pretty revolutionary. Like, the way we've been building lineups, like using Sims, I really love it, man. It's been pretty huge. I'm going to mess around with that this week with XFL for the main slate. I'm going to hand build most of my showdown lineups, maybe. I think hand building, I've seen the most success. Like, Scott Stradamus has been using that technique for showdown because, you know, the optimizers are just going to plug in a lot of this shit for you that aren't good lineups. So unless you're checking every lineup yourself, you're probably going to get some not so great lineups for showdown. But we'll let you guys know how this goes with the new optimizers and the Sims. Ellie, anything else to send us off with?
No, don't lock in your exposures too much, guys. Make sure that you have a little bit of balance spread out if you're playing MME. That's all I got to say about that.
Join the Discord. We'll be talking about Showdown in there too. We're not doing any Showdown shows this week, but we will be talking a lot about, big Showdown games, specifically that Defenders and Sea Dragons. So join that Discord. Throw us a like. Help get us to 50 likes. We really appreciate that. And we will see you guys next week.